Welcome on Fair and Square. My guest today is well-known political commentator and author Mr. Gurcharan Das. Welcome on Fair and Square, Mr. Gurcharan Das.
Nice to be here.
You're a well-known author, commentator, and written a lot of books on India and the changing phase of India from 91 till the present phase. But before this, you were a corporate honcho. How did this transition happen from a corporate guy to being a writer?
Well, I learned very early the difference between making a life and making a living. You know, in India, with our middle class insecurities, parents want their children to get a job, so they should go to college, learn something useful, engineering, medicine, so they can get a job. And of course, I come from a middle class family, so I can understand those insecurities. And certainly, I, didn't have money, basically. And so after college, I also went for a job. But I learned early when I was, my parents had something to do with it. My parents who lived in Chandigarh, by the way, my father was with the government, and I had got a scholarship to Harvard, and where I did philosophy. And what I learned is that making a life is about answering the question, what if you had only 3 months to live? How would you live your life? Now, if you have to answer that question, you're not going to say that I'm going to do an MBA.
I mean, you were the corporate head and the global head for Procter & Gamble.
I was global head for strategy for Procter & Gamble. But I started my career with this company that made Vicks Vapor Rub. And then of course but even when I was working, I was a weekend writer. My friends played golf, and I wrote on weekends. And I wrote 3 plays in my 20s. I wrote a novel, A Fine Family, in my 30s.
So this weekend writing kind of, graduated to this.
Yeah, I mean, I always knew that I was going to write.
And now, I mean, there are so many titles, under your belt, especially The Elephant Paradigm, The Difficulty of Being Good, India Unbound, and India Grows at Night, which is your latest one. What is this one thing, that you want to say through your works, or what reflects in your work?
Well, in some sense, I'm chronicling India's story in contemporary times. In India Unbound, I take the moral, the value of artha, what we call artha, which is business, which is making a living, moral, economic well-being. And I looked at this question, why was a nation how to get a poor nation rich? And why did a rich nation like India become poor? And those were the questions I asked. And that's the book India Unbound. But then I also predicted in that book that India would economically rise. And India obliged by rising. Right. And so we became the second fastest growing economy in the world. And even now, when our economic growth rate has come down, I believe we'll get back up. And we'll get back up. And the economic problem of India will not be the serious problem. I think we'll have poverty is there in every country. And we also, I think their poverty will not vanish, but it'll come down to a level which is manageable. And so really, I think the problem of India is the problem of governance. And that's why I wrote The Difficulty of Being Good, because the moral dimension of corruption, moral dimension of governance is what I was interested in.
I'm going to come to those questions, the economic and the governance issues. But before we get into that, I have, talking about your book, The Difficulty of Being Good, you talk about Dharma.
Yes.
And Dharma, in the context of governance, what is Dharma in terms of governance?
Well, the governance has 2 dimensions. it has a institutional dimension and a moral dimension. The institutional dimension is that if you change the incentive system, then people will behave morally. So if you place a policeman at a red light and who challans everybody, people will stop at the red light. That's the institutional dimension. Or our schools, the 1 out of 4 school teachers in our government primary school does not show up. And half the teachers who are present do not teach. The institutional dimension is that if you punish them in some ways, deduct the salary for that day they were absent, people will come. But the moral dimension is, will they teach with inspiration and say that teaching is my dharma, my job is to inspire young people? No. So I was interested in the moral dimension when I wrote The Difficulty of Being Good. And I went to the Mahabharata and the notion of dharma to understand. And I interrogated the book Mahabharata in order to understand the corruption from a moral point of view. You know, when corruption scandals, my columns that appear in Times of India and other papers abroad and in India, they also appear in many local language newspapers like Dainik Jagran, Dainik Bhaskar. And when corruption scandals occurred, like say the Robert Vadra case or the 2G scam, the headline in the newspaper, in the Hindi newspaper, was Dharma has been wounded. So people related this corruption to dharma.
So in this context, what is the dharma of a government, with the government in power? What is its dharma?
Well, dharma, the basic idea is to do the right thing for the people and not try to steal money which belongs to the people.
So what kind of inspiration does a government get? Can we say that the Constitution of India is a dharma shastra?
Yes. In fact, P.V. Kane, the great Sanskrit scholar, he actually called the Constitution, he won a Bharat Ratna, he called the Constitution a Dharma Shastra. The people who wrote our Constitution, they put the Dharma Chakra, Ashok Chakra, in the flag of the Constitution to remind us that the Constitution, that nation building is a moral project. Unfortunately, we did not sell the Constitution to the people. People thought the Constitution dropped from the heaven one day and landed on the earth. And afterwards, nobody sold it in the language the way Gandhi tried to sell his ideas during the freedom struggle. He used the language of Dharma, Gandhi, to sell very modern ideas of liberty and equality at that time. And we needed a Gandhi, but unfortunately he died right after independence.
But for example, there was this talk, of you getting into the political, foray space, and with Amrita Sen, that you guys wanted to float a party which really talked pure economics. But isn't a government just more than economics?
Well, it is true that Amartya Sen approached me and he said that, look, he said, Gurcharan, we need a secular right of center party in India, which teaches people about market, about importance of competition in the marketplace, and how competition is good for everybody and helps the poorest person. And he said, of course, that I'm a leftist, so I won't vote for you, but the country needs such a party, that the right of center should not be identified with a non-secular party.
You are very confident about Modi restoring the economic growth and taking it to 8%.
Yeah, I mean, I feel that he's our best chance right now.
What makes you think that?
Well, I mean, we all, in May, we all face this choice. Should we vote for Kejriwal, for Rahul Gandhi, or for Narendra Modi? And I'm a person who never voted before for BJP. But this time, faced with this choice of Kejriwal and Rahul Gandhi and Modi, I thought Modi was the best chance to pick up growth. And you know, they have dropped our growth from 9% to 4.5%. 1% growth is equal to 1.5 million jobs. Each job creates 3 jobs. That's 6 million jobs. Each job supports 5 people. 30 million people are affected in that way. So they brought a lot of pain, and we have to bring it back.
But what do you think, you know, that Modi is the guy who will restore this? What are the parameters through which
he's done it.
this?
I mean, he, unlike Kejriwal and Rahul Gandhi, who have never run anything, he ran Gujarat. He made it one of the fastest growing states of India. And
because
the way
people
he
say
talked,
he's communal, people say he's
but I
he's the
think
best salesman, you know, around. So he's built his model around these two things. And so are these
I don't think
factors?
it was because of communalism that people voted for Modi. People voted for Modi because he promised jobs, he promised to control inflation, and he promised to stop corruption.
Perhaps
you know,
he
for
brought
500 times that he mentioned Vikas, only one time he mentioned Hindutva.
Perhaps he brought the religious and the economic model together. Which is
But he never talked about religion in his speeches at all. He is single-mindedly focused on the economy. In fact, this is worrying RSS. They think the Hindutva agenda is going to be sidelined. He has no interest, zero interest in that area.
But if you look at the...
So it's not a religious model at all. It's an economic model. And frankly, we have a window of opportunity, an opportunity that will last only 10 to 15 years. If we don't get economic growth up now, that demographic dividend will turn into a disaster. We need to create 10 million jobs every year. Unless we grow at 8, we will not create those jobs.
So what do you make of this election, the 2014 Lok Sabha election? Have new benchmarks been set? Has the dimension changed, that the way politics will be run or how people will perceive their leader as?
Well, it seems to be so, doesn't it? I mean, the caste parties got decimated. The religious the discourse was totally sidelined. As I told you, for one time he mentioned Hindutva, he mentioned 500 times Vikas.
Do you think in UP he won just because of his economic benchmark, the kind of seats they got in Uttar Pradesh?
I think so. I think people are not... I think everywhere, people have realized that caste and religion is not the answer for India's future.
So in the context of Modi, where do the other leaders stand today, say in states or at the national level?
Well, I mean, I think Congress will have to reinvent itself. I don't think Rahul Gandhi is interested in politics. And the sooner the dynasty abdicates, the better it would be.
You think that is the only way Congress
I don't think there's any other way.
Itself?
I mean, unless you know of another way, I don't know of another way for the Congress, but India needs an opposition. So we need Congress to reinvent itself. As far as the other parties are concerned, as I said, the caste parties are demoralized. There is no, I said, even Hindutva and all, Ayodhya and all, that's not on the thing. You have a lot of background noise of these lunatics, the Hindutva lunatics, on the sidelines. But I don't think that's not the main thrust of this government.
Coming to the other parties, you mentioned Kejriwal. Because he created a lot of space for himself.
Yeah. Well, he dashed a lot of hopes. My wife voted for Kejriwal. And she feels very disappointed. And I think fundamentally...
Where did he go wrong?
What has changed in India is that we have an aspiring class of people who have come. Now, Kejriwal highlighted corruption, and that was a attractive message. But Kejriwal didn't offer answers to corruption.
Well, his Lokpal, which he suggested,
Yeah, but
was an answer.
Lokpal happens doesn't prevent corruption. Lokpal happens after the corruption has occurred. You need to prevent corruption. For that you need institutional change. And he never gave those kinds of answers that you need. How do you get justice in? Why should you wait 15 years in India to get justice in the courts? That kind of thing. That's why criminals get away with it. So therefore, I feel that that is Kejriwal's real failure. And also, Kejriwal is really doesn't even believe in the economic reforms of 1991. And the present aspiring class has come up after that 1991. And they did not sync with
He just built a model on anti-corruption and calling the other guy a thief.
Yeah, and
rather
price
than
control and everything. Basically he thought that business is all about.
Rather than, offer any aspirational model for the youth.
Correct.
That's where I think he went wrong.
I think so.
Isn't bureaucracy becoming a hindrance in India's growth?
Well, I mean, to a great extent it is. But what I'm happy to see now in Modi's government is that he's lifting the spirits of the very demoralized bureaucracy. During the Anna Hazare movement and after that, they were branded as being corrupt and sort of negative people. And he's now giving more importance to the bureaucracy than to his ministers. And he's trying to get things done.
I think that also has its pitfalls, giving a lot of importance to
pitfalls, but at least he is making them accountable. If they don't perform, then he doesn't accept that. So he's trying to separate the good and the bad.
Zero tolerance level towards corruption.
Zero tolerance level, but also if somebody he is very much onto giving a target, and if you don't meet the target, then you find yourself, he'll find you another job. And so he's, in a way, in the private sector, that's how you build accountability. And he's trying to bring that kind of accountability, which I'm happy to see that.
Taking you away from Mr. Modi, coming to the former Prime Minister, Mr. Manmohan Singh.
Right.
But some time ago, he, at a press conference, had made this statement that I hope history judges me better. Do you think history will judge him differently than what contemporary history is judging him?
Well, history will judge him in two phases of his life. History will judge him as a finance minister in 91 who did those reforms. And that will be a favorable judgment. But even there in my book, India Unbound, I have pointed out the importance of the support that Narasimha Rao gave him to do those reforms. On his own, he would not have done the reforms. Manmohan Singh is a very intelligent man. He's a very gentle person. He's a real gentleman. But he's a timid man. He's not a person with determination. The kind of person who has a strong will and will get things done.
What I mean to also say is because Narasimha Rao, when his government was there, he absolutely faced similar allegations, that government. You had the Jain diary, you had the JMM thing. They said he doesn't speak, the pout, doesn't open. So very similar allegations. But today history is judging Narasimha Rao as one of the finest prime ministers. Differently.
And I think the history will judge Manmohan Singh well for that period that he was finance minister. But history will not judge him for UPA 2. In the UPA 2, the government did too many bad things. And the Prime Minister knew. He knew that people haven't forgiven the fact. Even Chidambaram said the other day that he knew about the 2G, that what Raja was doing, and he should have stopped it. And so I think that, and also there were no reforms done at that time, the retrospective tax, all the wrong things. He knew that wrongdoing was going on, and he allowed it to happen. Now, history will not judge him for that. But the lesson I think the history will take is that we overvalue intelligence in people. I mean, we overvalue academic credentials. He is the only Prime Minister in the world who had a PhD in economics from Oxford, and he had taught at Cambridge. And so we were all very impressed. And he was a very intelligent man. He's a man of humility. He's an honest man himself. I was a great supporter and a fan of his and a friend of his. But I can tell you that what I have learned is that leadership is not about intelligence. It's much more about determination, willpower. I mean, and it's a mistake not only voters make. We get impressed by somebody with intelligence and credentials. We make this mistake in the business world. We see a resume, a CV that comes in, IIT, IIM, Harvard Business School. We say, let's take him. And at the end of the month, what does that fellow produce? A brilliant report. And you ask him, what happened to your market share? And so what we have, this is a lesson that we need people, we should recruit for attitude and train people in skills. And I would rather have a person with strong determination who will do things.
Your book, India Unbound, it's about your experiences, your travel experiences in India. And you talk very positively about India. You've always said that India will, rise, and it's risen. It obliged you, and you still are confident that it's going to, rise more. But do you have some fears also, in the sense that what can stall this, or what can stop this whole growth story?
Well, I think that my worry is institutions. I think Modi will be able to restore growth. But I don't know if Modi is an institution builder.
Because people are already comparing Modi to Indira Gandhi. I think Rajdeep Sardesai in his book has compared him to Indira Gandhi.
Correct. And Indira Gandhi was a destroyer of institutions
exactly.
rather than builder.
Yes.
Yes. And but Modi, what I have realized is that he's a very pragmatic man. He's not ideological. And so it's a bit like Deng, who said, it doesn't matter what's the color of the cat, as long as it catches mice. So I think Modi will reform even institutions which he finds are dysfunctional. And so it's much more difficult to reform institutions. Margaret Thatcher reformed institutions.
So the two parts. A is not to destroy them. The second part is to reform them further.
Yes, exactly. I mean, I personally think that the ability to destroy institutions, I mean, it could happen. But I think the courts, the press are too strong in India. It's not easy to destroy them. Some of the things I see him doing are actually building and improving some of the institutions. For example, one of the actions which was first decided by the UPA government, but they didn't implement it, which this government is implementing quite rapidly, for example, is the notion of self-attestation. All of us, for a legal document, we presented
This
in
is
court.
actually a model which they picked up from the Punjab government. They introduced it a few years ago.
Well, it doesn't matter where you pick up a good idea, but if you implement it in a big way. And now I know in some states, they have gone wholesale with this idea. Otherwise, you can imagine, all of us used to run after a government officer.
It takes away that corruption which about 99% of us have to face,
exactly.
that going to the officer and getting
Correct. So, this is the kind of small institutional changes that are coming about, and which, when you add them up, they do amount to a lot. But my worry is that he is, personally, he is not going to allow corruption to occur. As he sacked his whole RSS cabinet in Gujarat on the grounds of corruption. But will he change institutions which will live after him, I don't know. There the jury is out.
Your latest work is this book, India Grows at Night.
Yeah.
What does this mean?
Well, the idea is really I don't complete the full sentence, which is India grows at night when the government sleeps.
Right.
And it's the story of Gurgaon, which came up almost without the help of government, and the private enterprise came in and built this
which also
miracle.
actually gave a bad name to a certain extent, called crony capitalism, and the Vadra case is part of that private partnership with the government.
Correct. But the fact is today, Gurgaon has 27 malls, 7 golf courses, 39 million square feet of commercial space. It's giving jobs to millions of people, and it's a driving force of India's growth. So these are very positive things. But my story is not to applaud Gurgaon. My story is that India needs to grow during the day. And for that you need institutions to change, what we've been talking about. And I feel that institutions will perform better under Modi, but whether he will do the reforms that will make them change for his successor and his successor, that is a question that's open as far as I'm concerned.
I hope your confidence in Modi actually translates.
Well, I hope so too.
Yes.
I mean, when we go as voters before a ballot box, we have to take risks. Now, we could have chosen Rahul Gandhi or Kejriwal or Modi. Each had his plus and minuses. I personally thought that he was our best chance for getting jobs, primarily jobs, back, which was what we needed most of all.
Thank you, Mr. Gurcharan, for visiting us on Fair and Square. Thank you.
Thank you.
खबरों की दुनिया में आइए, हमारे साथ कहीं भी और कभी भी जुड़िए। हम मिलेंगे फेसबुक पर, हम दिखेंगे यूट्यूब पर, हमें फॉलो कीजिए ट्विटर पर। खबरों के साथ बने रहिए रात दिन।